Everybody, welcome back to Greg's Grooves. Today I want to talk about 5 tips that I wish I could give my younger vinyl collecting self and maybe save him from a few pitfalls of the hobby as I see them. So if you're a young collector, I think these tips will be helpful. So yeah, let's get into it. So my first big tip for young collectors is do not buy vinyl from big box stores when it can be avoided and with certain exceptions. So by and large, the vinyl that you're going to find at Walmart, at Target, at Amazon, and retailers like that is going to be repressings, remasters, usually from digital sources, often from questionable pressing plants. Part of the point of collecting vinyl is to have an analog experience. So if your musical tastes venture back into the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, you should look for pressings that come from the 60s, 70s, or early 80s. That's why I said there's a couple of caveats to this piece of advice. Obviously, if you're into newer artists, Billie Eilish, Olivia Rodrigo, I'm probably dating myself here even as I speak, you're not going to be able to find that stuff vintage because it's not vintage. And we know it was all recorded and mastered digitally. So if you really want to own that in vinyl, sure, you can pick it up from a big box store or places like Newberry Comics or Barnes & Noble. What I would say is there's a couple times a year where you can really get some decent deals from the big box stores. Usually around Christmas, Target runs a buy 2, get 1 free on books, vinyl, and various other media. That is a great time to stock up on new vinyl. So basically like once a year around Christmas, that's when I'll look for newer titles that, you know, are not vintage, that I know I'm not going to be able to buy secondhand, and that's when I'll scoop them up. So for the young collectors out there, that's my first piece of advice. Try to buy vintage whenever possible, and only buy new pressings of new music whenever possible. My second tip is don't buy vinyl in poor condition, and this is me speaking to my younger self most directly. I was so intent in my early teens on amassing a large collection that I didn't necessarily care as much as I should have about the condition of that vinyl. I would go on Craigslist and I would look for people trying to unload large amounts of vinyl, tag sales, things like that. And I would get so excited because I'd get there and I'd see, ooh, Santana, Rolling Stones, all these groups that I want. And without even looking at the quality of the vinyl, I would just be like, yeah, I'll take it. I'll take it. Give me a deal on this large amount, and thinking I had conquered the world. Like, oh my goodness, look how much vinyl I got for such little money. Only to take it home and realize that a lot of this vinyl didn't have inner sleeves. A lot of this vinyl was in, at best, good condition, full of dirt and scratches and just unpleasantness. And slowly over the years, I ended up having to replace titles I really liked anyway because I couldn't tolerate track skipping. I couldn't tolerate crazy surface noise or uneven wear, especially as my equipment improved, and I'll get to equipment in a second. So look, fight the urge. I'm all for thrift store finds. I'm all for diving into estate sales, but save that money for vinyl that's truly worth it. It is so tempting when it's cheap to just load up and say, the condition's okay, it's good enough. You're going to very quickly realize that you should have just stayed with less vinyl of higher quality. So that's my second piece of advice. Along with that, my third piece of advice is kind of connected. Equipment. It is very tempting to get upgrade-itis, and I wish I could get the money back that I spent on constantly chasing the sound. I have tried new equipment, old equipment, high-end equipment, mid-fi equipment, and I can tell you with certainty that the best thing that you can do as a young collector is invest in decent quality, I won't even call it vintage, but older equipment. I'm talking Technics, however you want to pronounce it, equipment. I'm talking Pioneer. I'm not necessarily talking Macintosh and all these high-end brands. Stick to your Onkyo, Sony, things like that. Consumer grade, but from the 70s and 80s. If you can afford it, silver face stuff, stuff that's in a metal box, or even the stuff that has the wood paneling on the side. That's going to be like the best bang for your buck. But even the black plated mid 80s stuff, into the early 90s, you're still going to get good sound and good reliability at a good price. And in fact, that stuff that is from like the early 90s can be very, very good and can be very, very cheap. So when I'm shopping for equipment as a young listener, the first thing I'm doing is avoiding all-in-ones, Crosleys, Victrolas. I mean, most of you out there already know this, but I'm also avoiding the Project turntables, the Orbit U-turn turntables. They're overpriced for what they are. They're planks of MDF with okay tone arms and okay motors. I'm not against belt drive, but to have really consistent speed and low wow and flutter with belt drive turntables, you're going to need to go much higher end. I've had a Riga P3 and I still was not happy with the speed consistency. The $100 that I invested in my Technics SL1400, secondhand, best $100 I ever invested. I sold my Riga P3 for $700 on Craigslist, spent $100 on the Technics, and I'm way happier. All right? So young people, get separate components, get them used, learn how to fix them, learn how to replace a cartridge, a stylus, how to align a cartridge and a stylus, how to do basic maintenance work like oiling things, greasing things. You will save so much money and be paid back tenfold in quality. If I could go back to 16-year-old me and tell him to do that, I would have saved myself the anguish of selling away some of the best, most reliable equipment that I had, buying much more expensive and less enjoyable equipment, and wishing I could go back in time to when prices were cheaper. Don't be like me. My fourth piece of advice. I've already talked about less is more as far as quality of records. And in earlier videos, I've talked about how tempting it can be to go out and get the entire discography of your favorite band because you have to have it. Try to avoid that sort of desire. And one of the ways that I avoid that is I encourage myself to find new music via my vinyl search. Look for strange covers. Look for pieces of collections and thrift stores of music that you would otherwise not listen to or not gravitate towards typically. I'll give you an example. Recently, I was at the Salvation Army here in my hometown, and someone had brought in a whole personal collection, all boxed up, really nice condition, and it was all Italian folk music, mandolin music, stuff like that. And me being Italian American, I was just so intrigued. You know, I had never really explored that world of music beyond maybe some like stereotypical sort of stuff. And I took this vinyl home because it was in great condition and it had beautiful covers, and I was intrigued, and I played them, and yeah, now I find myself playing them monthly, really. Avoid the desire to simply buy everything you listen to already on vinyl, and use the vinyl collecting experience as a way to find new things that you wouldn't otherwise listen to, things that might not be in print. Because I've done some research in some of those Italian albums, and yeah, they're not on Spotify, they're not on YouTube, they're nowhere to be found. And I know that's surprising in this age of the internet where everything's accessible, but they're nowhere to be found. And my final piece of advice for younger vinyl collectors is really simple. Play them. And I know that sounds boneheaded, but these are not art pieces. I mean, they are. I love looking at a good album cover, and I think that the actual act of playing vinyl records is akin to appreciating a piece of fine art. But I say play them because you look at these collectors of these prestige pressings, as I always call them, these rare pressings. I don't know how much they're actually enjoying their collection. You know, I've seen videos on YouTube where a person picks up this really rare pressing of this Beatles album, and they play it once, digitize the file, and never play it again. And I'm like, why? You know, we've already have the master tapes digitized. You're just going a generation off of that, or 2 generations, and it's illogical. And much of audio enthusiasm is illogical, and I admit that me owning this collection is illogical. But to me, the most illogical thing is to own it and not use it. I have the same feeling about car enthusiasts. Besides being a record collector, I love old cars, and I have a 1992 BMW E34 5 Series that is my daily driver, because you know what? To enjoy a car is to drive a car, not just look at it, not just kind of let it waste away in a garage. And a lot of people are letting their records do the equivalent of waste away in a garage. They become a conversation piece, they become an investment, and the joy is really gone. Buy things you're going to play, and all of this advice really goes into that. Buy things that are in good condition, that you'll want to play, that won't mess up your equipment, that isn't dirty and filthy. Try new things, but within reason, not wasting your money. And yeah, I think you'll be very happy with the hobby, and you won't waste a ton of money. I know I said 5 tips, but I'm going to add a little extra. We've already done a video on how to clean records on a budget, but invest in one of these. Just a little brush for cleaning the record right before you play it, getting those little pieces of dust off. I also like this stylus gel. If you're a drummer, it's kind of like moon gel. It does a really nice job of cleaning off your stylus before and after playing a record, and these things aren't expensive. So I know that was a long video. I hope you stuck around for all 5 of those tips. I'm sure I'm going to be coming back with a lot more tips and tricks and things, but those were the 5 that really stuck out to me. Yeah, I think that's going to be it for today. So thank you for joining me this time on Greg's Grooves. Hope to see you again.